So my name is Erin Quintero, and I want to introduce you to this We Are America book that we've written at the 11th grade level at Irondequoit High School. So this all began back in the summer when I learned I would be teaching a course that was new to me. I had never taught English 11 here at Irondequoit. And one of the first things I did was look on the internet for some inspiration. So I took a course essential question, what does it mean to be an American? And just ran with that in Google. And pretty quickly I hit on a project coming out of Massachusetts. A woman named Jessica Lander, for the past 5 years, has been running a project that answers just that question. So with her kids, she's been publishing books of student personal essays, and she's invited in the most recent years teachers like me to apply to cohorts, to be fellows. So I thought, what's to be lost here? I went to their website, applied as a fellow, answered their questions as honestly and directly as I could, and it turned out we were a good fit. I found out I was a member of the 4th cohort with 14 other teachers across the country, and the process began. So I took this work to my students in the fall. We spent the first semester, so that's about 20 weeks, selecting stories, looking at other stories, refining what do we have to say that really speaks to us as Americans, private, personal stories. And once I selected 30 that I thought would be great for this book, we began the editing process. Truly, our biggest hurdle was finding each of us our story, because it seems to run with humans that we don't think there's anything important about our lives. No one cares. Why would I tell that story? It only meant something to me. So once the kids really started to decide formative episodes from their life, something that really meant something to them, whether that's a family heirloom or a tradition or a struggle that they've had to overcome or a piece of their identity that's developed over time. Once we had that, then they had their story. The thing that most impressed me about the kids was their courage. And right behind that, their flexibility. Because truly, I was taking this curriculum and modifying it on the fly, which meant they were also participating on the fly. And they were very forgiving. And they were unclear at times where this was all going, but they just had faith in the process. So I'm most encouraged by their flexibility and their courage. They tell stories in this book that most adults I know would hesitate to tell. We said from the beginning, the students and I, that this just wasn't just an exercise for us, that this was an exercise for every listener and reader that's out there. So we're hoping that people recognize bits of themselves and recognize they're not alone, and maybe even take some hope and inspiration from these stories of overcoming.
So my name is Abiola Kumasu. I'm a junior in high school, and my story is about my name. Being that my roots are from West Africa, I found self-identity and learned to be more confident in myself. In my story, I talked about how I was bullied for my name, and I think that was kind of difficult to talk about. I know that I'm older now, so I don't feel as much fear or pressure from other people, but I think it was just hard to talk about an experience that wasn't really good for me. I can learn a lot from myself just by speaking out, and other people can learn a lot from me.
Like what?
To be more confident in themselves and their culture and not be hindered by what other people think about them.
You want to marry someone who's your best friend, she replied. And as curious children often do, I accepted this as the truth. Well, then I'm going to marry Dana. She's my best friend. And my mother simply smiled.
My name is Amelia Reed Miller, and I wrote my story Colorblind about the story of how I figured out my identity, my sexuality, and all the obstacles that I faced on the way. The most difficult part was that confidence to really be like, am I proud of this enough to not care what other people were going to think or really worry about how their view of me is going to change after reading that? The other thing that I faced was a sort of doubt if my story was unique enough to even publish, because I mean there's millions of coming out stories all over the place. Was mine really unique enough to be in the book? We're in a school district, and I'm in a community where that stuff isn't something that I necessarily needed to ever hide. It was more of just like a personal, like self-centered fear. But definitely if it had been like 10, 15 years earlier, I don't know if the school would have even let us publish a story like that. A woman stood up and said, I know that there are girls out there who are going to read your story, and they're going to feel seen, and they're going to feel heard, and they're going to realize that this isn't something that they need to feel ashamed of, and that there are people who have been proud of who they are, and that that's acceptable, and you should be proud of that.
My name is Bar Stomek. I wrote about the 2015 coup attempt in Turkey and how it affected me while I was there, seeing it firsthand from experience. I was there on a trip to see my grandparents with my whole family. I was like 10. I remember the day, it was hot. Me and my friends went to the beach, swam on our way home. I got home. On our way home, we changed. We went out, and just happened out of nowhere. Found out I try to block things that have happened to me instead of reliving it and thinking about it personally through my life. And through that, I've learned that I need to take in emotions more than just block them.
My name is Dana Roslovecchi, and I wrote about style and self-esteem. We talked with a partner about what we wanted to write about, and my partner was like, you should write about the idea I didn't talk about. And I was like, so I'm definitely not going to get picked, but then I did, and it was like, well.
I'm okay. I'm tough. So I threw on jeans, a leather jacket, studded bracelet, dark eyeliner, and lipstick. At the time, I would only wear this stuff when I was in a mood, but I secretly loved it.
I already had 2 people come up to me about it. One was a custodian who works here, and he was like, I lived your story, and I know exactly what you were talking about, and I had that happen to me, and was picking out parts and talking to me about all of it. And then the night of that we read at the library, there was this mom who came up to me, and she was like, I was just like you. I was the punk rocker girl, and I shaved my head, and I had very Christian parents, and they were not happy about it, but stay you and keep rocking on.
I'm Lucas DeSalvo. I wrote about how I had to reconsider what I was doing during my sophomore year, and how I chose a different path of extracurriculars and how it changed my future. So I was a cross-country runner for our team, and I realized that it wasn't good for me or my mental health, so I decided to switch and go check out some of our acting opportunities, and that really changed the rest of my high school career. I really never thought, I never really thought that this really changed my life as much as it did until I actually wrote about it. I was like, oh, I participated in the school show and it was a smash hit, and that's cool, we're moving on. But when I wrote about it, I was like, this really changed the path of high school for me. I know that if I was definitely still doing cross country, I might still be struggling. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the team. I love everyone on the team and the coaches, but it just wasn't for me. So definitely making that switch was definitely better for me. A very valuable lesson to be learned. My lesson was not to be afraid to put yourself out there, and me overcoming that fear was part of the reason of my success.
I'm Nicole Lamberson, and I wrote about how losing my grandparents brought me closer to my family and taught me to value traditions.
Our hearts broke all over again. My mother and her 3 siblings were left with no parents, nowhere to turn to for parental guidance and advice. Losing her meant losing some of those traditions too.
So I think just holistically, you learn that you never know what someone else is going through. Reading these stories, I'm just shocked that this is what this person faced, right? But there's also a lot of similarities and places where I can sympathize or even empathize with them. So it's kind of you never know what someone else is going through, and everyone faces their own struggles, but you can also see that everyone grows and everyone has a different journey through life. So I think there's some unity in that. I think there's a lot that can be learned. So I want to inspire people to express themselves freely and be willing to kind of wear their emotions on their sleeves, which can be a very difficult thing to open up. And I want people to know that it's okay to struggle and to grieve even to this day and have a healing process. It's not just something you can get over easily.
I didn't want to deal with any of the problems that I faced because I did not want to bother. Since my mom felt that change in me, she sent me to Puerto Rico to live with my aunt.
My name's Sebastian Torres. I wrote Sazon Batería Reggaeton. It's a story about me coming into New York, Irondequoit, and really struggling my young life and going on a trip to Puerto Rico. And when I spent time there with my family and my culture, I really learned what I'm capable of. And like when I came back, I was a new person. I just wanted to change, and it's been working out. I'm so proud of who I am in my family now. Like I've been introducing my friends to some of my culture, and they enjoy it a lot. I think it's really fun, bringing people what I have, with my family and stuff. Music mostly. They're really into music, and they want to trip to Puerto Rico now. They love the island, and they want to, be part of it. I want everybody to know that they're capable of being who they want to be. I feel like with a lot of younger people who struggle with school, maybe it's not they want to struggle, they just don't know what they want to be. They just need exposure to like stuff, and they just need a little boost to kind of know who they want to be.
I'm Victoria Petito Castro, and I wrote my story called Metamorphosis, which is about my life coming together and where I was born and where I went, where I traveled, what I learned, and where I'm now. I was born in Italy, northern Italy. So I'm a very passionate and expressive person, and I constantly make connections to coincidences, and I love living my emotions. So when Ms. Quintero was like, you can have this prompt here and I'm allowing you to share your personal story, I knew that I wanted to write about the strings of my life and where I walked to come together. The most difficult part was deciding what to include and exclude in my story. Not rambling on, making sure that it's relatable, understandable, and entertaining for the reader, but also keeping it honest for myself and the people who I included in the story. I learned that I'm growing up because looking back on my childhood, I feel very nostalgic about it, and it was a strange realization that it's not just recent events, but it's more of memories that I'm looking back on, and that was a big awakening moment for me, like, wow. Well, I hope that someone that reads my story can look at it and say, I want to travel like that too. I don't want to limit myself to who I can become, and that to know that change is going to happen and it's going to be uncomfortable and unknown, but it's going to be okay because that's what makes us grow, and I find that beautiful about humans.